Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Joe Samaniego here, and with me we have Ben Schneider from lastcar.info and Kobe Lambeth. We want to welcome everyone in the chat room. Share your questions, comments, opinions with us on the air. And a big thank you and welcome to our Patreons. Colin, the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest in us through the link to our Patreon or do a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee or Super Chat. A big thank you to Leonard for the 2 cups of coffee yesterday. Very grateful for that. And Jason for the Super Chat yesterday. Do so. We'll thank you on the air for Leonardo. A big thank you again. And we encourage everyone. Simplest way you can support us is the simple subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs throughout 2024 as we cover IMSA, which is part of the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And that's where we're going to start off with IMSA, where we saw Felipe Nasr hold off Tom Blomqvist for a big win. And it was really to nobody's surprise that the 62nd annual Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona had exciting battles throughout the race, and it all came down towards the end. And one of the big things, of course, in the final miss at the 24-hour Endurance Classic, we had a little bit of an odd situation. The NBC Sports Broadcasting was showing 2 laps to go in the race, so everyone was anticipating that Tom Blomqvist was going to have 2 laps to try to get around Nasr in the number 7 Porsche. However, when the number 7 Porsche came across the line, the checker flag waved with 23 hours, 58 minutes completed, and 24 seconds. The TV camera showed the Porsche Motorsports camp. They were confused over at Team Penske. They weren't reacting to the finish. They just seemed like, is it really over? A lot of the fans, I know a lot of the folks were just caught by surprise that the checker flag came out. But Felipe Nasr, he passed the start-finish line. Checker flag came out. It was over. Ben, we've been hearing a lot on social media. How confused were you with the ending of this race? And do you think IMSA needs to put out an official statement explaining the circumstances?
Well, Joe, let me tell you something. I'm no mathematician or math expert or anything, but I'm pretty sure that 24 hours means 24 hours and 2 laps to go implies 2 more laps to go. And that's not what we got here today. Now, it probably wouldn't have mattered because I think the 7 was getting through the traffic much better than 31 was. So I think most of the classes, if not all of them, I think GTP, you can see there on the screen, the unofficial results. I think that was the only one that was even a little bit still in question. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong later on in the show, but the 7 was clearing the traffic very well. Probably wouldn't have made a difference, but the reality of the situation is if I were still a member of that 31 team, I wouldn't be too happy at this moment, given what we saw unfold there at the end, because you're right, Joe. The broadcast implied that there were 2 more circuits left, and we hadn't hit 24 hours on the clock, so I don't know how you can argue that the race was over, except for the fact that they prove a checkered flag, and that ultimately is the universal symbol that a race has come to its end. So it's an unfortunate situation because I think it really was a great race there that was, really up in the air and in question. It amazes me, nowadays what these teams can do and how close the competition is. After 24 whole hours, it still comes down to just a couple of seconds. And, you think back to the incredible battle we saw in the LMV2 class last year with, I think it was like 16 thousandths of a second. That battle last season. So, I mean, these races can come down to those margins and come down to the very last lap. I don't think it would have because the 7 was getting through the traffic very well. But, it was a very confusing situation for everybody watching. And I think that it would go a long way for IMSA to put out a statement explaining why the decision was made to throw a checker when it was. Because, again, both lap-wise and time-wise, keeping track of the race, I don't know how you can argue that the race had come to an end in that moment.
Yeah, I was just so confused when the checker flag was waving. Knew we still had some time left. I have to agree with you. I think the finish of the race, unless, of course, this is part of racing, all the hypothetical what ifs. If 2 lap cars did make contact ahead of the leaders, that could have made it a little bit more dicey. But that's just all speculation. At the end, it was a really great race. I think the finish was a bit lackluster. Not exactly what we want to see. One of the comments in the chat room, what a race. And of course, a slight mess up with the time. Definitely, I think that is just something where it's just one of those deals with racing where hopefully we don't see anything like this occurring again. But I would agree if IMSA could come out saying, hey, here's what happened, here's how we're going to address it. So this way we don't have that kind of confusion. It just makes the experience a little bit more better, especially we all want that coverage of the team celebrating. Here comes Nasser to the checker flag. Everyone's on pit road. They're celebrating, jumping up and down with joy. Not confused. That's not how you want to win the biggest sports car race here in the United States. Confused, like, did we just win the race? We've seen this kind of issue where Formula One, Max Verstappen won a championship based off confusion in Japan about the race distance and points. Not the most exciting way to have a champion or a big race winner crown. But of course, the on track action, I think that is going to live on for a long time because on track racing we saw essentially came down to the number 31 Action Express Wheeling Engineering Racing Cadillac and the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports Felipe Nasser, Tom Bloomquist. They battle hard. Bloomquist made an aggressive, very impressive move on Nasser in the trial, going to outside splitting a GTD car to take the lead. That was a highlight of the moment. I thought I was going to be the winning moment of the race. But after the number 12 Vasher Sullivan Racing Lexus brought the final close caution, Nasser was able to get out ahead of Bloomquist and stay out there. Big win for Penske, Porsche, plus Nasser, his co-drivers Dane Cameron, Matthew Campbell, and Joseph Newgarden. Kobe, we'll bring you in for this one. Given the strength of Cadillac in the sunlight, were you surprised the Porsche was able to hold off to get the win?
Yeah, I was a little surprised because, as you mentioned, Joe, well, and looking at the race as a whole, during the first few hours of the race, you saw the Cadillacs, they looked unstoppable, both Action Express and Chip Ganassi racing in the sunlight. But as the sun went down, and it seemed like the Cadillacs lost their advantage, and during the nighttime hours, that's when it seemed like the Porsches really woke up. And, then Porsche was really controlling the race, as the Cadillacs ran into problems. Action Express, they didn't really run into any major issue, but, the 01 Chip Ganassi race, and they had some electrical gremlins, end up costing them the race, and which led to their retirement. But as we know in sports car racing, you'll have these teams that'll show maybe about 80, 85, 90% of what they can do. And then, once you get to that final 10% of the race, then they go full throttle 100%. So I think Porsche, was just holding back just a little bit, and they showed their full hand with all that, with everything they had towards the very end. And I think, that ended up being the difference as to why Tom Blomqvist wasn't able to get by Felipe Nasser to get the win there. And I know yesterday we were saying, that Cadillac probably had the best chance of winning the race. They almost won, but, just wasn't meant to be this year. I still don't think Cadillac has anything to be ashamed of, because that Action Express car, it was right in the mix until the very end. That's really all you can ask for. But I'm sure there's probably still some disappointment in the General Motors camp that they weren't able to close out the overall victory, because they were extremely fast. But at the end of the day, Porsche Penske Motorsport just ended up executing better today.
Yeah, I thought that move Blomqvist put on Nasser there at the end was going to be the winning one, but ultimately it wasn't meant to be for the team. But I was very surprised as well. I was surprised. I watched the pre-race show with you guys yesterday, and great job on your coverage there as well. But to hear even Sebastian Bourdais himself saying that everybody's saying we're the favorites, Cadillac are the favorites here. We've got the fastest cars and everything, and they're the favorites to win the race. Even he was saying that he didn't quite think that was necessarily going to be the case there. But I certainly, like you guys talked about yesterday, obviously qualifying times aren't always indicative of who's going to be at the front at the end of 24 hours. You certainly have a lot of time for things to go wrong or things to go right for drivers starting closer towards the back. But I probably would have leaned towards Cadillac here in this situation. But obviously the Porsche team was able to hold on there, and it was a great result and victory for everybody on that team. Joe, I think you're muted.
Yeah, Joe, you're muted.
One of the big things, I was muted. Joseph Newgarden, he was on that team last year. He was an LMP2. He made his GTP debut at Moto Petit Le Mans in 2023 in his first time competing for the overall win at Daytona top category. Newgarden is now an overall Rolex 24 race winner. This adds to his accomplishments and his legacy. At just 33 years old, a Tennessee native driver coming off an Indianapolis 500 win in 2023, 2 IndyCar championships, 29 IndyCar Series race wins. Now the Rolex 24 in Newgarden's only scheduled start this year in sports car racing. So Ben, starting with you, What do you think of the role Newgarden played in the race, and do you see more sports car racing starts in his future?
I do. And I think, you look at some of the great IndyCar drivers of the past and the success that they've had in this race for Joseph Newgarden to be able to follow in their footsteps and to do so within the same, not calendar year, I guess, but same 365-day period that he's the defending Indianapolis 500 champion. He now gets a Rolex watch to go with that. I mean, it's just an incredible career that this guy has put together. And, I said on our Indy 500 post-race show yesterday that the Indy 500 to me was the last big crowning achievement that he needed to cement his career. And he's gone out and added even another one here in an entirely different discipline in the sport, 24-hour sports car endurance racing. So you look at the body of work that Newgarden has put together. He's certainly on track at only 33 years old, like you mentioned, Joe, to go down in history as one of the all-time greats in this sport. And I look forward to seeing what he could accomplish, maybe as far as 10 to 15 years in the future here still with the amount of time he's going to have left in his career. So a great victory for him today again, and I think only further cements his legacy as one of this generation's best.
I totally agree, Ben. I don't really have much else to add there, but definitely Joseph Newgarden is one of the best drivers of this generation. He could just retire right now, and he'd already have a Hall of Fame racing career. But he's still, like Joe mentioned, he's just 33 years old, still has quite a few years left in his racing career. So I'm sure Joseph Newgarden is going to continue to add to that legacy, add more wins, more championships, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. But I thought he did a really good job. And this year's Rolex 24 fulfilled his drive time. He kept the car clean. He was really fast. I watched him during the nighttime hours last night, and he kept the car up front, didn't put a wheel wrong, and just did exactly what he was supposed to do as a co-driver. I know Joseph was being modest during his TV interviews, been like, "Hey, I just showed up, and it was just my co-drivers who did much of the work." But Joseph deserves, just a lot of credit, just as much as his other teammates, because in endurance racing, it's a team sport. Each driver has to do their role. Each strategist, each member on the pit crew. It takes a whole village to make this all go around. So Porsche Penske Motorsport, this whole organization, deserves a lot of credit for everything that happened in this race. They ultimately ended up with them at the top step of the podium and getting their Rolex watches. So I thought Joseph Newgarden did really well in the factory Porsche GTP car. And in regards to future starts in sports car racing, I think we're going to see him in a lot more sports car races in the future. Unfortunately, Porsche is not going to work out for this year because they're going with their factory drivers in the endurance roles this year, and we're not going to be able to see those 4-driver lineups, so there won't be a role for Joseph Newgarden in the GTP class with Porsche Penske Motorsport. But after winning the Rolex 24, maybe he'll bug Roger Penske to try to get him in a seat at the 24 Hours of Le Mans next to try to win that one overall. But that's really going to depend on what Roger Penske is going to allow him to do, and also the IndyCar schedule, because sometimes an IndyCar race will fall on the same day as the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Then it'll obviously be impossible for him to be able to do both. But Joseph Newgarden, it's already been known that he's bugged Roger Penske for years to let him race outside IndyCar. He got those IndyCar championship, got an Indy 500, was able to get this GTP ride, won the Rolex 24, and I guess Joseph is just adding to the leverage that he has. So if he wants to go win Le Mans, if the circumstances are right, it wouldn't surprise me if Roger Penske gives him the green light to go chase that as well. That would just be another amazing feat to add to his legacy already.
A lot of potential Joseph Newgarden has over there. A couple of comments in the chat. What's up, y'all? From Chrome Diesel. Nice seeing you all at the start of the racing season, as our MX5 race was great. So as the Rolex 24 finish was just a weird. What a race, what a finish. Joseph Newgarden is a legend. From Adam. Encourage everyone in the chat room watching. Share your comments, questions. We'll be happy to answer them on the air. And of course, the super chat will always be very much welcome. Switching over to LMP2, Era Motorsports ended up taking the class win. Team regulars, Ron Dial, Dwight Merriman, they get Rolex watches along with their 2 young drivers, 23-year-old Christian Rasmussen, last year's Indy Next champion, who competes in IndyCar this year with Ed Carpenter Racing, and 17-year-old Connor Zilisch, who recently signed with Trackhouse Racing development driver. During the final stint of the race, Era Motorsports trusted Zilisch and Rasmussen to take the car to the finish. The 2 potential young drivers, young stars in the making in NASCAR and IndyCar, bringing the LMP2 team win to the finish home. Kobe, starting with you. The Zilisch and Rasmussen proved their worth as drivers by perfectly executing their final stints.
Absolutely, Joe. I thought Connor Zilic and Christian Rasmussen did an excellent job at the end of the LMP2 race there to claim the victory in class. And I know, with these younger inexperienced drivers, you may not want them in at the end, and especially even if they are fast, you traditionally want someone like a Ron Dial who's a veteran, more experienced in these situations, wanting to take it to the end. But at this stage in Ron Dial's career, Ron Dial has always been a fast driver, whether it's in a GT or prototype. But as he's gotten older, he's obviously not as fast as he used to be. But with these young guys like Zilic and Rasmussen, considering how fast they are, I think Aero Motorsport made a really good decision to turn to them, because they were turning in some very fast lap times in LMP2 and outperforming their other competitors in the class. And for Zilic and Rasmussen, to get a Rolex watch, been this young, and everyone's, like you mentioned, Joe, everyone are very excited about their future in motorsports, with Zilic on the NASCAR side and Rasmussen, who's going to be running on the road and street course in the Indy 500 this year with that Carpenter race. And those are two hot young prospects that people are very excited about and looking forward to seeing what they can do in the rest of their motorsports career. And I think their performance at the end of this race only raised their stocks even more.
Yeah, Kobe, I don't have too much to add other than I think we're going to be talking about Zilic and Rasmussen, each of them, quite a bit more on Grid Live Encore, which is Monday nights at 7 o'clock. If you want to tune in later this year, shameless plug there. Looking forward to working with Brandon Crossland again for the third year in a row. But I think that, these are two drivers that we talked about on that show last year that are working their way up through the ranks that, clearly, you look at what they did today. I know LMP2 doesn't get as much spotlight or as much love or attention as the top GTP class, obviously, but it's still a 24-hour endurance race that you have to go out there and beat a lot of top drivers and top teams and top competition, and proving their worth today. Absolutely. I think these are two names you're certainly going to have to look out for in the years ahead here down the future.
Now looking at class winners of both GTD classes, number 62, Risi Competizione Ferrari 296 GT3 1 GTD Pro with James Collado, Alessandro Perguidi, David Regin, and Daniel Serra. As the number 57, Windward Racing Mercedes AMG GT3 of Daniel Morad, Philip Ellis, Russell Ward, and Indy Donche took GTD class honors. So another Rolex 24 hours in the books. The next big race for IMSA, the Mobile One, 12 hours of Sebring on March 16th. Ben, Kobe, to close out the 62nd edition of the Great Endurance event, how would you rate this year's race, and what stood out to you the most?
I think this race was very, very strong overall. Like I said, it amazes me how frequently the last several years these races have come down to the last lap over 24 hours. A little bit burned by the finish, though. I'm still a little bit confused as to what happened. So hopefully we get some further clarification on that, a little bit more so than we already have. And I think it's unfortunate because I think it did put a little bit of a damper on what was otherwise a very, very strong event. I do want to just comment quickly, though, very unfortunate for the 33 car in LMP2. I know that they were involved in quite a few incidents, so I feel bad for those team members that had to persevere throughout much of the race into the morning. I think they finally said forget it and retired the car at some point in the closing hours there. But that was something else that stood out to me. But in all seriousness, though, Joseph Newgarden, I think, is the big takeaway from this today for fans of all motorsports that are looking at some of the all-time greats of this generation. Like I mentioned earlier in this segment, to add a Rolex to his trophy collection at this point is simply phenomenal.
Yeah, Ben, I thought the race was absolutely phenomenal. Saw some great racing in all four classes, from GTP, LMP2, GTD Pro, and in GTD. And like you were saying, it's really crazy, looking at sports car racing these days, where you can have so many cars still in the fight for victory after 24 hours. This is mind-boggling. When I first started watching endurance racing, well over a decade ago, you'd have, like, say, the Audi win at Le Mans by a few laps, and it wasn't even close, and on the final lap of Le Mans, you see them slow down and just take it all in, because there was no chance of someone else getting by them. And now you can't really do that in endurance racing, because all the teams have really raised the bar super high, and you have to be on your game from the drop of the green flag to the very end of 24 hours. So just once again, very impressed with the on-track product we saw at the Rolex 24 Daytona, and this is an event that doesn't disappoint at all. And obviously, we came in expecting to see a Cadillac victory, but ended up being a good fight between the Porsche and the Cadillac. That the Acura this year, just didn't really have the pace, and then both Wayne Taylor Racing and Andretti cars, ran into some issues. But kudos to that number 40 group for being able to regroup to try to get a good finish out of that. And BMW, they were sneaky, lurking, but they both ran into issues later on in the race. So it's so unfortunate for the Rahal group there, but to sum it all up, thought the race was really, really good.
Overall, it was a really good race. I stayed up quite late to watch into the evening, where we saw the 0-1. Essentially, they were looking like they were going to be contenders for the win. That didn't happen. It came down to just one Cadillac in the field. During the night, we were also looking at the weather. Was that going to change? We kept looking at the radar. That did not happen. But at the end, we still had some great racing all across the board from start to finish. That first hour, a little bit more chaotic than normal, it seemed, especially when that Faster Sullivan car pretty much got in trouble with the LMP2 car that was spinning out. Tough break for them, but overall, they were able to come back, try to get something going just for their teammate to later on bring out the final full course caution, setting up for a great finish. The finish, unfortunately, with the checker flag coming out by surprise, put a little bit of a damper, but overall, I think a lot of us are going to remember this as a pretty good, solid race. Just build up with the momentum because we had a record crowd this year for the Rolex 24. I think we're going to get a bigger crowd next year. Now, one of the big things, too, besides IMSA, we also had Formula E, where in Formula E, Nick Cassidy is now the championship leader.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. In the Formula E race weekend in Diriyah, Saudi Arabia, saw the top two in the championship from last year take race wins. Jake Dennis control race one to earn his first win of 2024 with Jean-Eric Vergne second and Nick Cassidy finishing third. The race was relatively calm despite Mitch Evans' adventure and misadventure, going from third to fifth on the last lap with a failed pass attempt for second place. While race two saw the top three of Oliver Rowland, Robert Frange, and Cassidy up front. Attack mode was a big factor in the 30 swap in the lead, but the Jaguar had the pace. Cassidy got around one and had a 100% podium finish rate in the first three races. Cassidy leads the championship by 19 points over Pascal Verlaine. A penalty dropped Dennis out of 10th and down to 12th. Scored no points. Joe, how impressed are you with Cassidy's performance, and could the field be in trouble now given his strong start to the season?
Yes, they're in trouble, I think, because Nick Cassidy, at the end of last year, he was looking really good with the Envision team. And a lot of people were wondering, is this just late season momentum, or is he really starting to come into his comfort zone in these Formula E cars, this generation of car, and really start showing his full potential? He made the switch to Jaguar. A lot of us thought, well, Jaguar have been known to have a slow start to the season. DNFs, not finishing the points. Nick Cassidy, 100% podium finish rate. That is very impressive. This is his best start he's had in Formula E. I think everyone's going to be in a little bit of trouble because they knew Cassidy was on the radar for the championship. He is pulling out quite a lead on everyone else, including the defending champion, Jake Dennis, who has not had that great of a start compared to last year. Overall, I think this is a big wake-up call to everyone that Nick Cassidy is the man you're going to have to beat for the championship. This is not the same Formula E with the Wheel of Destiny. For you to get to the destiny of the championship, you got to go through Nick Cassidy.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I mean, you can just look at the standings on the screen right there, and that have that big of a gap after only 3 races. I suppose the caveat to that is, Pascal Verlaine had a very strong start to the year last year, and then faded back a little bit. But Cassidy has certainly positioned himself almost 20 points up over the entire rest of the field here. You can't ask for a much stronger start than that. So I think, like you mentioned, Joe, the rest of the field could very much well be in trouble here as the season goes on. It's still obviously early, and as we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, we do have a bit of a break coming up before we get into the heart of the season where teams can reset and really make their push. But at the moment, I think Cassidy's certainly the driver to beat.
Yeah, definitely. Cassidy, Jaguar, definitely the driver and team to beat. And in the team's championship, Jaguar currently has a 31-point lead over DS Penske and 40 over the Tag Heuer Porsche team. They're only the second. I mean, they are the only team that have both drivers finishing the points in every race so far. However, Cassidy has finished ahead of Mitch Evans in every race. Evans is fifth in the drivers' points, 36 points behind Nick Cassidy. So, Ben, I'm going to start with you on this next question. This is only the second. I mean, this is only the third time Evans has scored points in the season's first three races. Does he need to step up to avoid becoming the number 2 driver behind Cassidy at Jaguar?
Yeah, I think so. You might even be able to make the argument, given how big the gap is already, just after 3 races, he might be the number 2 driver right now. I have to confess, I'm not as familiar with Formula E as I am with Formula One, so I'm not sure exactly how much it takes for a driver to, achieve number 1 status over number 2, similar to how it is in F1. Because George Russell beat Lewis Hamilton in points in 2022 at Mercedes. I don't think very many people were arguing that Lewis Hamilton had lost his number 1 status, but then again, Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time Formula One world champion, so I don't think one-off year was going to, lower his ranking there. But in terms of priority for this season, I think as of right now, you look at where Cassidy is in the standings just after a few races, and like you mentioned, Joe, it's still certainly having more parity than Formula One has had the last couple of years for sure, but not quite the wheel of destiny that it was when I first came to Grid Network, and it was like picking a name out of a hat for pick a winner every week. You just never knew who was going to be at the front of the field. Cassidy looks like he started to establish himself. So I think if you're Mitch Evans, you have to take the month off that we have coming up here or so and really try to reset and make another run at it once we get into the heart of the season, because he could risk losing that status if he hasn't already.
I'll almost agree with you, Ben. I think he may have already lost that status, especially what we saw in the first race in Diriyah. He made a couple moves where I felt like this was beyond being aggressive. This was just being sloppy and a bit careless. He'll go to the inside line. It was very dirty on John Eric Verne. On more than one occasion, try to pick up position. He'll go wide, lock it up, and he did that again on the last lap. That essentially costed him the podium that allowed Cassidy to get around, and Sam Bird, his former teammate, who is now with McLaren. Sam Bird is not exactly having that great of a season. This was his big race to shine in the first race of Diriyah. Ford missing the opportunity in the podium. I feel like this was just a big blow to essentially Mitch Evans' race. And then that second race, I mean, Mitch Evans really, one of the big things was that penalty for Jake Dennis, which hasn't been updated on the standings. That is how he got the points there. So one of the big things, if it wasn't for that penalty, he would be essentially one race short of scoring points on every race. But he still got to that because of the podium penalty Jake Dennis got. Mitch Evans needs to take this break, just sort of reset, like you said. He cannot afford making mistakes. If he's the number 2 driver already, because already we're looking at Nick Cassidy well ahead in the standings, he just needs to accept the role. Okay, he's going to have the preferred strategy. He's going to have the preferred position on the track if we're racing side by side. Just deal with it. Try to run your own race. That's the best thing I think Mitch Evans can do, and not try to push the issue, because the last thing the head of Jaguar wants is to have the 3 drivers coming together, making contact. They had that last year with Sam Bird, Mitch Evans. If that starts happening again and Nick Cassidy starts losing ground in the points championship, I think then more people are going to be focused on, is Mitch Evans being that good of a teammate?
Yeah, and this is just some of the things that come up when you have 2 really good drivers on your team. Yeah, and I agree with what both of you guys were saying about Mitch Evans here. Yeah, he's gonna have to take some time, reevaluate his mindset and get himself in a top shape before he gets that unpreferred strategy. Nick Cassidy starts getting the number 1 driver treatment. Yeah, because they essentially have 2 number 1 drivers on their team right now. I know Mitch Evans, typically gets off the slow starts to the season, so maybe it's just one of those just slower starts, and he'll just, maybe by the time we get toward the midway point of the season, he'll start, matching Nick Cassidy, and then both of them will be exactly where they need to be. But right now, Nick Cassidy is where he needs to be, and it seems like Mitch Evans still has a little bit of work to do. And before we move on to the next question, I believe we have some comments in the chat room. Kane's Cats Heat 305 says, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you as well. Hope you're having a great day. Hello to Star Fox. Hope you're having a great afternoon. And you say the 23.9 hours of Daytona. Yep, with the checker flag coming out a little early there. And our own Joshua Birch says, hello, all tired, hungry, drained, but delighted with the coverage all produced this weekend. Amazing work all around, and hope everyone enjoyed a great Rolex 24. Yeah, and Josh, make sure you get something to eat, take a hot shower, and get a good night's rest, because you've truly earned it, my friend. Excellent job on Josh Motorsport YouTube channel. They're doing a watch along for all 24 hours. And moving forward with the Formula E, there are some surprises at the back of the driver's standing. 7 drivers who have yet to score any points after the first 3 races, and this includes Antonio Felix Acosta, Nick DeVries, and Lucas Di Grassi. All 3 of those drivers are past Formula E champions. For Antonio Felix Acosta, is it time for him and the team to reevaluate what's happening, especially when you see how strong his teammate Pascal Wehrlein is performing?
Big time. Yes, he has to take this month break, really reevaluate what's going on, talk to the team. What are we missing? Why are we not scoring points? Because at the end of the day, Pascal Wehrlein, he is contending again for the championship. After that win in Mexico City, we all thought, okay, that team is going to go to Diriyah. He won there, swept the weekend. He's going to do it again. And I anticipated that Antonio Felix Acosta would not be far behind. That did not happen. Really, it seemed like that team just did not show up. So I think it's not only Antonio Felix Acosta that has to reevaluate what's going on. Why are we off to no points, this bad of a point start this year? The team has to reevaluate. Where do we miss the mark at Diriyah? Are we going to be okay for the next race later on come March? Plenty of time to regroup, refocus. But for Antonio Felix Acosta, especially when you're a past champion of Formula E, you have a really great team. To be 0 points and your teammate is second in the standings, I think that's a big red flag, even if it's only 3 races in the season.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, all 3 of these drivers, past champions, kind of shocking that none of them have scored a point yet so far through these first 3 races. But Antonio Felix Acosta in particular, I think the most surprising. But, Nick DeVries and Lucas Di Grassi as well. Nick DeVries, former champion who went to Formula One, things didn't work out. Now coming back, this isn't the morale boost that he needed. And Lucas Di Grassi, who's really been with Formula E since its inception. I think all 3 of these guys need to just, take a step back, reevaluate things over the month and a half we have off here, and then come back and see if they can right the ship, because like we said, still early in the season, there's time to do that, but at the same time, you can't get off to a worse start in the standings wise than only having than not having a single point to your name and being at 0 on the leaderboard.
Yeah, Ben, it's definitely got to be really hard for those 3 past Formula E world champions, to be 3 races in and not having scored a single point. Yeah, I'm sure they'll get their first point on the board here soon within the next couple of rounds or so, but the longer it goes on, the more frustrating it's going to be, especially, being past Formula E champion. They're used to being very successful, up there in the fight, in the points, battling for wins, and, not to have a drought scoring points. It can get very frustrating as time builds up. And I believe we have a few more comments here in the chat room. We can display those on the screen. I got a comment there from Star Fox talking about the Ligier LMP2, and you also said that the BMW will not have an easy year as well. Yeah. Well, just like we were talking about on the pre-race show yesterday for the Rolex 24, we were saying that BMW, nobody's really talking about them. People were talking about the Cadillacs being the favorite. People were talking about heading into the Roar, about Porsche, and all the upgrade changes they made on their car. How they could finally be in the fight this year. And others thought, Wayne Taylor Racing, with Andretti given their history in this race, they'd be in the mix as well. But nobody really talked about the BMWs. And to be fair, they were, like I said, they were just lurking, behind, waiting for something to happen to others. But unfortunately, something happened to both of those cars, so they ended up, not being in the fight. I think BMW definitely does. I think they do have some potential, to improve their performance off last year, but it seems like BMW, still just a little bit off on the front runners. And I'm sure you're referring to the Sean Creech Motorsport Ligier, which caused, multiple full course cautions and had so many electrical gremlins going on before they, decided to retire the car, with, in the final hours of the race. Yeah, they definitely had a very tough Rolex 24 at Daytona, but at least they have, more data now for the Ligier. Ligier's been out of action for a while. Currently, the only, Ligier chassis currently in operation sports car racing right now. It's been basically an all Orca world and LMP2. So, Ligier didn't have any customers, but Sean Creech decided to go different and go with this Ligier. But now they have data that they can use, and try to correct some of the things that went wrong in Daytona. So when they show up to the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring, they can certainly be on their game and try to have a much better performance than they had at Daytona. And now to close out our Formula E section, as we mentioned, Formula E is getting a whole month off. No racing for Formula E in February. They'll return on March 16th for the Sao Paulo E-Prix in Brazil Day, exact same day as the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring for IMSA. So, Ben, how critical is this break for everyone to catch up to Jaguar?
Well, it's very critical. It's also critical for Jaguar to not lose this momentum and be able to keep that coming out when we come back on March 16th. But, it does play it provides an interesting wrinkle in how these Formula E teams approach their season, because, it does feel kind of weird to be, 3 races into the season in the end of January, or, most racing series are in their off season at this point, or just coming back, like IMSA is with the Rolex 24. So they've always kind of been on this off sequence sort of calendar, and then, crowning their champions in usually in July or sometime in the summer. So it's an interesting dynamic that you have here for these teams, but certainly an opportunity for those that we were just talking about, in particular, your 3 former world champions that are off to such a dreadful start, but they don't even have a single point to their name. It's an opportunity for them to reset, but it's also an opportunity for Jaguar to make sure that they continue to build on their momentum here and maintain it as we come back for race number 4 in a month and a half time.
Jaguar, I feel with their powertrain, they have a huge advantage. Nick Cassidy behind the wheel, he just seems to be really getting the most out of the vehicle, where it was with Envision, the customer team of Jaguar, or now with the factory team, he's just getting the most out of it. When you look at Envision, considering they are the defending teams champion, now they're essentially tied with Andretti. I think this really speaks to the talent and the way Nick Cassidy is able to bring data sharing information to Jaguar to get the most out of the car. Overall, all the teams, especially the Porsche powertrains, that being Andretti and of course Tag Heuer, Porsche, they're going to be working on where could we catch them, particularly with the software. The powertrains, they're pretty much all set, but you could get some gains in the software, the programming of these vehicles. That's what I think you're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at Sao Paulo. That's going to be a street circuit, not going to be the traditional F1 track we all know. They got a couple of good races, I think, where they're going to try to make those grounds. And the big thing, too, I think qualifying is where they're really going to start looking at where can we get ahead, because now that we enter some of the street courses where Mexico City, wide track, Diriyah, it was a street course, but Nick Cassidy pushed himself up towards the front. You need to be ahead of Nick Cassidy to try to get a win and catch up to Jaguar, Nick Cassidy, because Jaguar, they're looking really good. I think they're going to be really hard to beat this year, but that month break is going to be critical for everybody to try to catch them up.
Yeah, Joe, totally agree with everything both of you guys have said about this. It's going to be interesting to see what everything looks like once we get to the Sao Paulo E-Prix on March 16th, to see if Jaguar can continue to keep the good times rolling, or if some of the other teams are going to be able to catch up to them, and really make this a fight for the championship. But right now, Nick Cassidy is going to head into his 1 month vacation, very happy and pleased to see where things are going. And that concludes our Formula E wrap-up section. So now, Ben, I'm going to turn over to you to talk about the very first race of the 2024 World Rally Championship season, Rally Monte Carlo.
Thank you, Kobe. The 2024 World Rally Championship is underway, with Rally Monte Carlo taking place this weekend. Terry Neuville, as you just saw on your screen, has taken his second Monte victory, beating home Toyota teammates Sebastian Ogier and Elfyn Evans. As you see the full results there on the left side of your screen, Evans was the early rally leader after dominating Thursday night. In the bulk of Friday's running, he was overhauled by Ogier and Hyundai's Neuville on Saturday morning. Before Neuville raced into a lead he wouldn't relinquish, with superb drives on the final stage on Saturday and Sunday's opener. Neuville then went on to take the 5 power stage bonus points on Sunday to complete a near-perfect weekend. Neuville's Hyundai teammate Lloyd Tanik finished 4th, over 2 minutes behind the winner. The top Ford runner, meanwhile, was Adrian Formeau in 5th. And on the WRC2 side of things, Johan Rossel took the win over there. Joe, Elfyn Evans was the favorite by many for the championship. Has Neuville put Evans on notice with this victory?
He has put him on notice because one of the things entering this season, I feel with Thierry Neuville, he was going to be the number one challenger for Elfyn Evans. Elfyn Evans, the Toyota Gazoo racing team, they have everything to win the championship. The experience, the data, the cars. Hyundai, they've had some changes here and there, but Thierry Neuville had always been that constant lead driver. The big thing, though, he could never seem to always put together solid, consistent finishes. He had a couple wins a year, but too many DNFs, did not finishes, crashing out, mistakes, missing out on podiums. He needs to have a good, clean year, and that's why I was anticipating he needs to come off strong. Can't get any stronger than what he did at Monte Carlo. He won here back in 2020. I felt that this was a great opportunity for him to come out strong and prove to Elfyn Evans, this isn't your time to just become the third Toyota driver to get a championship. I'm going to be trying all I can to claim that championship. At the end of the day, it's going to be more on, I think, Thierry Neuville to keep that constant pressure on Elfyn Evans. If he could continue performing like he did, and especially up towards the front, he's going to be really hard to beat, not just for Elfyn Evans, but I think for the other Toyota drivers and especially the Ford drivers.
Well, Joe, let's talk about the point system real quick. WRC changed it to depend more heavily on Sunday's results this year. The top 7 all claim points, with the first earning 7 points all the way down to 7th earning 1 point incrementally there. This is on top of the normal FIA point system, 25 for the winner and the top 10 finishing in the points. Now, we've seen dominant drivers in this series over the years, and this year there's really no clear favorite as of yet. Why do you think this point system was introduced, and do you think it's a good move for the championship?
The way I see it, when they announced this championship points version, it was to make it where the championship will remain closer. We've seen in the past where you'll have on that first day a team, a driver, some mechanical issue or a crash, and they're out of it. And they're essentially out of it until the power stage, where in the power stage, the final stage, they're hopeful to be one of the 5 fastest to claim points. Now we're saying, okay, as long as you make it to Sunday, if you're one of the 7 fastest, a bigger window, you could get points. And if you just had a mechanical failure on that first day, Thursday, mechanical failure, okay, you're not nowhere near the top 10. If you can make it to Sunday, have a fast enough car, and get 7 points, 7 points is better than no points by missing the top 10. So I think this is really a new element to keep the championship closer, because at the end, we've seen where with Toyota Gazoo Racing, Kali Rovanpera, Sebastian Ogier, they wrap up the championship early. A lot of times it's over their own teammate. We don't exactly have the star power. We said this sometimes feel like a series without an identity. You don't have that star driver full time. Thierry Neuville, Autonic, if they could both perform, that would be great. But in the past, they haven't. Elfyn Evans, he's been the 3rd best out of this Toyota group. Now this is his opportunity. With this point system, the mistakes that happen on Friday, Saturday, Thursday, if you could get that car in good shape and win the stages on Sunday, 7 points rather than 0 points, you're going to keep your championship hopes alive. I think this was an effort. Since we have such a short season, there are only 13 races. We lost Mexico. That's not on the calendar this year. A couple other races that we're hoping to have did not pan out. I think this was just an idea that, hey, we're going to have a shorter season. We would not want to see it wrapped up after only 10 races if one team goes out and totally dominates it. This is a new element to keep it close, so that way maybe by the season end we could have a closer championship battle for the championship and World Rally Championship.
I don't know, Joe. It reminds me too much of a playoff system or stage points or sprint races there to add bonus points there. I'm not sure I like it, but admittedly not a series I follow as closely, so hopefully it works out better for WRC than it has, in my opinion, for some of the other series we cover here. And on that note, let's talk about some of those series now and what we have to look forward to. Joe, take it away with our grid preseason poll.
Yeah, for the 2nd consecutive year, we had our preseason poll. Now, of course, for everyone that tuned in for the IMSA race weekend, IMSA is part of the Grid Endurance Performance Index. So they will be coming out in April. And of course, Matt White will have all the updates in Wednesday's Grid Tonight. For the grid ranking, Formula E World Rally Championship, they're up and running. They're underway. The other series, Formula One, IndyCar, MotoGP, the NASCAR Cup Series, and the Australian Supercar, Repco Supercar Series are in the grid ranking. And here is our preseason poll for the second consecutive season. The defending champion of the grid ranking from last year, Max Verstappen, to no surprise, was the number one pick for most of everybody. He's looking really strong. A lot of folks anticipating he's going to have a very easy year, but you take a look at Formula E's Nick Cassidy. He is 8th place. He is the highest one that was in the preseason poll. And when you look at the grid rating for Formula E, he is right now number one. So a lot of people are anticipating Nick Cassidy was going to come off very strong this year. World Rally Championship, Thierry Neuville is currently leading that rating because they've just done one race, and he had an impressive race weekend. But in the preseason poll, a lot of folks were looking at Elfyn Evans, again, 14th to be ahead of him, Thierry Neuville 20th. Now, of course, the grid ranking will get up and running on the first Sunday of April, as every year. And one thing to note, 2 NASCAR drivers in the top 10. Last year, no NASCAR drivers finished in the top 10 at all. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Calero Perez still made the grid ranking poll. He will not be running full-time, but last year we saw Sebastian Ogier running part-time make it into the grid ranking. And for the first time, we don't anticipate Shane Van Gisbergen to be in the grid ranking since the start in 2017. Of course, he's running a partial schedule in NASCAR. The grid ranking, you can get more information on our website, gridranking.com. And April, first Sunday of April, do not miss it. That's where we'll reveal the first week of the 2024 grid ranking, the 8th annual. And on our website, you can see all the past champions and scores of the grid ranking. And of course, the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Now, Kobe, we're at that point of the show where it's time for all of us to share our one shining moment.
Yeah, time for a Grid One Shining Moment. And please comment down in the chat room and tell us whether it's from the Rolex 24 Daytona, the doubleheader in Diriyah, Saudi Arabia, or Rallye Monte Carlo. What's one moment in motorsports that stood out to you the most this racing weekend? And Joe, I'm going to start with you for your Grid One Shining Moment.
My one shining moment comes from World Rally Championship Thursday, the second stage, as all the drivers are heading up the mountain. This is becoming a bit of a tradition and has been growing and growing every year. And that is all the fans that are essentially camped out there at the mountain, tailgating with all the fireworks, the flares. And as each car is going up, it is just a huge party, the spectacle of light, fireworks going off as these rally drivers are going corner after corner, fully focused on the road ahead. It's just impressive considering how the co-drivers reading the instructions of which turns to take at what speed. Drivers just focus on the road ahead. And you have all this distraction of the fans celebrating the start of World Rally Championship. It is such a spectacle. I want to go to this event, experience it myself. And that is my one shining moment, is the return of World Rally Championship, the second stage at Rallye Monte Carlo.
Well, I guess Newgarden would be the easy and obvious one, but I feel like we talked enough about him at the start of a segment or start of a show with the IMSA segment. I'll point out a moment from Formula E, and I don't know, maybe Kobe will go with the Rolex, and then we can have all three of our series covered here. But I know we talked about Mitch Evans and the gap to Nick Cassidy in the points and what he needs to do to close that. It certainly wasn't for lack of trying in race number one. That move that he put on the final lap to try to get around Jean-Eric Vergne and the others that he was battling. I know that he ended up fading back to finish fifth, but certainly made it interesting there at the end. I know Jake Dennis won the race by a pretty hefty margin, but certainly a thrilling final lap there and finish that race. Unfortunately, didn't work out, but the opportunity to take it and go for it and make things interesting, that's a shining moment for me from this past weekend.
Yeah, and Ben, we are going to have all three of our series covered. My one shining moment is coming from the Rolex. I got to give a call to the two privateer Porsches in the GTP class, Proton Competition and JDC Miller Motorsports, because they were able to finish 5th and 6th overall, which is very impressive for a privateer. Being in a factory back class, with millions of dollars poured into these efforts, with the hybrid technology, which is very complicated. And for to be a privateer and to finish 5th and 6th overall in the GTP class, I think that's a very impressive feat for both of those organizations, because we saw Chip Ganassi racing, one of the stalwarts of motorsports, have issues. We saw Wayne Taylor racing with Andretti have issues. we saw some of the big teams in the GTP class, with much bigger budgets than Proton and JDC Miller, have issues, but these teams, they just hung around and kept the car clean for the most part and brought home a respectable finish. Thought it was a really great job for the Proton group. Jimmy Bruni, Neil Yanni, Alessio Picariello, Ramon Dumas, and then JDC Miller Motorsport, Tishman Vanderham, Richard Westbrook, Phil Hansen, and Ben Keaton. Thought those two privateer teams have a lot to be proud of. If they won the race, that would have been like a massive upset, because you expect the factory back teams to be up there in the mix, and for these teams to to still be that far up, in the running order after 24 hours. I think that's a big win for Proton and JDC Miller. And I believe we also have some comments in the chat room to look at as well from Joshua Burton. His one shining moment was the battle between the 7 Porsche and the number 31 Cadillac, and you said one racing moment. Yeah, that was a really great battle. Like Joe mentioned at the top of the show, Sam Blomqvist and Nasser, split that GTD car on the bank and exited the trial. That was quite a battle. I also thought that was going to be the winning move of the race, but it just wasn't meant to be. And his one shining moment was the whole Rolex 24 broadcast, and everyone who joined and helped out. You said felt good to be back and enjoyed it all. On to the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Yeah, still got a few months until Le Mans in the early summer. And Adam Limmery said that his one shining moment was Joshua Birch covering the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, and Formula Zone is telling Josh to go to bed. Yeah, that's a really good idea, Josh. Typically, some of the best sleep I get is of the entire year is post Rolex 24, because this is an exhausting race to cover. And make sure you, like I said, make sure you get yourself something to eat, a hot shower, and get into bed, because I sleep really well after the Rolex 24. And Monday morning when I wake up, I feel so good.
And we encourage everyone, links in the video description to Josh's channel as well as Ben's channel and all our team members as well. And be sure to subscribe to our channel right here, the Grid Network on YouTube. Hit the bell icon. We're going to have more sports programming coming up with Grid tonight, the Women in Motorsports, and then Grid Life pre-race for the NASCAR Busch Light Clash at Los Angeles. All this made possible in thanks to our patrons, investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in us each and every month. You too can invest in us. You'll get some Grid Network stickers that we have here. We'll mail them out to you, and your name will be in gold as the newest member. You could also do Buy Me a Coffee, a one-time contribution. Leonardo bought us coffee in the last show, the Grid Life pre-race for the Rolex 24. So a big thank you for him. He made it onto the leaderboard. And of course, super chat as Jason did in the last show. And visit gridranking.com. There you can learn more about our team members, follow them online, see our articles throughout the racing calendar, and of course, follow the Grid Ranking and the Endurance Performance Index. And for everyone that has been up for the 24 hours, good opportunity, get some rest. We'll be back on air, but just be sure to subscribe to us first right here. For Ben Schneider and Cody Lambeth, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time.